made it very clear that I recognize that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Good afternoon, good day, good morning. Not sure what time of day you'll be taking the time to stop, pause for the day, and take a listen to what we're talking about during this Black History Month event, which we deemed Healing Through Our Heritage. I am Sandra L. Washington. Tonight's night is going to be all about Nneka Hall and her lovely guests. And their guests will be talking about maternal health, maternal and fetal health. They are part of Count the Kicks organization, and they advocate not just for Count the Kicks, but for all women who actually need the help, who don't know where to turn to. It impacts them, the women, and it impacts the babies. And with this being Black in labor, we decided this year, since both of us have nonprofits that actually are in the health resource and health research sector, we decided that, hey, we're going to put a spin on this. And instead of calling it Blacks in Labor, which is the official title of 2025 Black History Month, we're going to call it Blacks in Labor in the Medical and Healthcare Profession. Our community needs jobs. Plenty of people, men and women, are struggling out here because they're not aware of the many job options that are available to them in healthcare and medical. So they're struggling when they really don't have to. And our two lovely senior subject matter experts tonight, along with Nneka, are going to tell us information and provide information for us on why we don't need to be struggling and how it is that there are jobs available and options available. We can give you those options. We can't make you take them, but we can give them to you because they are certainly out here. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the lovely Miss Nneka Hall and let her introduce our senior subject matter experts for the day.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Tonight we have with us Count the Kicks, ambassadors for Count the Kicks. And I wanted to begin by letting you know my Count the Kicks journey. I saw Count the Kicks on Zoom, not Zoom, on, oh goodness, it's called X now, Twitter. And I was confused. You know, I had never heard of fetal movement monitoring. I had never heard of kick counting. And at that point, I had already had my fourth child. So I wondered, I reached out to them and began asking questions and asked more questions. And you on here understand, the ones who know me on here understand, if I go down a rabbit hole, I have to know as much as possible about that rabbit that dug that hole. So I noticed that in their first 5 years, an all-white staff was able to decrease the Black infant mortality rate, the Black stillbirth rate, in Iowa by 39%. And in their first 10 years, they were able to decrease the Iowa stillbirth rate by 32%. That 39% stood out. And that was without them reaching out directly to Black community members, Black organizations. So I began to ask the question, what would happen if they reached out to doulas, reached out to community organizations that provided support to families who suffered stillbirths? What would happen if people started talking about stillbirth in Black and Brown communities the same way they talked about overall stillbirth, which, or even more so because of the statistics. So I started talking about this in the classes that I teach. And I started saying, well, they need, at that point, I think they only had one Black ambassador. Nancy and Tamika, you can correct me because you're currently ambassadors. I haven't been an ambassador for a couple of years now. But I wanted to learn more. So you learn more by listening, talking to the horse's mouth. So I invited them to an event that's similar to this one. And at that point, they didn't have nearly as many ambassadors and not nearly as many baby saves as they currently have. But then I said, well, I'm sold. If you can indirectly manipulate the stillbirth rate of the Black community in your state, why can't we as a collective body do the same? Hence, we have Dr. Nancy Lewis from St. Louis, Missouri, and we have Tamika James Isaac in near the Charlotte area of North Carolina. Tamika, take it away. Tell us all about your journey. Tell us about your organization and how you became involved with Count the Kicks and how this beautiful organization, how you bring it to your community.
Thank you, Nneka. So our journey started in 2018 when we lost our son, Jace. And that whole experience within itself was just, of course, traumatic and very eye-opening, I guess. And it's kind of how I kind of learned about the Black maternal health crisis, like being in the middle of crisis. I almost died myself during that period. I developed HELPZ syndrome, which is closely related to preeclampsia, but a lot worse. And so after a 45-day stay in the hospital, tons of surgeries, trying to figure out what went wrong. And, like normally when something happens, you're always thinking about like, what did I do? Right? What did I do to cause this? Like you're just trying to figure out the why. And, after reviewing my medical records and all these things, I realized things I didn't know. This is my first pregnancy. I was 35 weeks when we lost Jace. He had measured small at 34 weeks. He had failed a non-stress test at 35 weeks. 4 days after that doctor's appointment, he had died and I was dying. And just trying to get to the bottom of what happened. I reviewed my medical records and realized, though my doctors told me I was high risk for preeclampsia, they had never done urine tests on me the whole time I was pregnant. And so just knowing that like what we had gone through could have been prevented had my doctors been doing the basic types of tests to detect what I had. And so that's how we started our nonprofit, Jace's Journey, in 2019. It was really a passion project trying to figure out a way to prevent other families from going through what we had just experienced and what we're still going through, right? Because, grief has no end date. It's a very wavy thing. And so I think Nneka, probably in one of your classes is really how I learned about Count the Kicks, but still didn't really know a lot about Count the Kicks. But I was a part of a stillbirth working group, and we had the opportunity to share stories during this working group. And I think she was a diversity manager at the time, actually reached out to me to help them to participate in a Black maternal health event. And when I did that, I started to learn more and more and more. And usually when women have stillbirths, nobody says that they're preventable. Like nobody talks about stillbirth in the doctor's office in the first place. That's number one. You don't hear about stillbirth usually until you've had it or you're at some type of event and people are talking about it or you're in the birth space. And so like during my pregnancy, nobody said anything about stillbirth being a possibility. And after, nobody even said, okay, well, 1 in 4 stillbirths are actually preventable. And Count the Kicks actually figured out how to do it. So once I started to learn more about how the app works and just the knowledge base of what it is, and our organization is really about education. It's about education and advocacy because there's a lot of voices that need to be heard that don't have the opportunity to be heard. And I wanted to make sure that wherever there's a space for people to talk about stillbirth or either maternal mortality in the Black community, there was a voice at the table. There was a personal life story at the table. And if that voice had to be me, then it has to be me. But making that space, making that the story known, like getting stillbirth to not be taboo, getting stillbirth to be a conversation, and then to let people know, like, hey, we can prevent this. And that's what Count the Kicks does. So as soon as I heard about how Count the Kicks works and, getting more information, I was like, sign me up for that. If I can use our nonprofit, Jason's Journey, where we talk about education, advocacy, and engaging the community on topics like birthing justice. We do like film screenings and just anything. We support families through with a grief box, and we do a lot of different things throughout our community, trying to get people more aware of what stillbirth is and to get people more open and talk about it. So when I go to conferences and have tables set up for talking about Count the Kicks and how it can prevent pregnancy, I have brochures in my bag. So if I see someone that's pregnant, here, here's how you can, count fetal kicks, because it's so important, and it's a simple, easy thing to do that has a tremendous impact. So that's really how I became, a Count the Kicks ambassador. It was like a no-brainer. It's like, here's something that has been proven to work, and doctors still don't talk about it. Like, they literally still, even though the information is there, even though CDC, the Hear Her campaign, talks about fetal movements, some doctors still don't talk about Count the Kicks. Count the Kicks should be in every OB office, just because it's simple. It's a simple tool that you can use to prevent stillbirth. It's easy, but it it was just a no-brainer for me. If I can talk to women, if I can prevent any family from having to go through what me and my husband experienced, sign me up for that. And that's really why Count the Kicks to me is just so important, and making a tremendous impact on the way we talk about stillbirth, the way we understand stillbirth, and just even having stillbirth in legislation. Just in June, we were able to get the Stillbirth Prevention Act passed. And that was a lot of work for a lot of advocates going to DC, talking to legislators, trying to get the word stillbirth in legislation. Prior to that bill being passed, the word stillbirth was in no legislation in the country, and it had never been. And now, just from that, states can now use the funds that they already received from HRSA. Well, they did receive it. I don't know what's going to happen now, but the money that they receive from HRSA, they can use that now to prevent stillbirth. Just because advocates like me and NECA and other ambassadors for Count the Kicks went to DC and talked to legislators to get that into action. So that's what's important, is education and advocacy, and trying to get stillbirth as a topic to where we can prevent it from happening, and it can not be as prevalent as it is now.
Thank you. And one thing that I found very interesting about fetal movement monitoring, also known as kick counting, it's so easy. It's easy, and it promotes bonding with the baby. People talk about how, oh, well, if we talk about this, it may cause someone to be
panic, anxiety. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, if I had known that, if someone, and it's been around for a while.
A long time. Yep.
If I had
exactly
known with pregnancy number 3, which ended in a 39-week stillbirth, I would have been doing it. I would have had the words.
Exactly.
I would have had the tool. And that's all.
Exactly.
An additional tool to add to your prenatal toolkit, so that you can go in armed with the data, because we know
the data.
These doctors are so data driven that if you go in and say, well, the baby's acting funny, well, the baby has hiccups, well, the baby has this X, Y, or Z, they're going to say, oh, it's all in your head. Or no, the baby's fine. Oh,
it's normal pregnancy things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So is there anything else you'd love for us to know about Jace's journey, about the work that you do before we go over to Nancy?
Yeah, I do want to make one more point. You touched on it a little bit about bonding with the baby with Count the Kicks. I do want to talk about this. It not only can help prevent stillbirth, but it can also help detect something going wrong with the mother. Because if the baby is having issues, the mother is possibly having issues too. So I want to make that point about Count the Kicks. But Jace's journey is again a passion project, and we work really hard to, like I said, advocate for legislation that affects not only state level legislation, but also federal level legislation. Again, we also support families in a time of need if they have experienced stillbirth and infant loss. And we speak at a lot of engagements, like conferences and stuff related to perinatal loss. One of our main goals is to get a different approach to how we support people when they've experienced a loss when it comes to miscarriage and stillbirth. A lot of people don't know what to say. A lot of people don't know how to react. And to leave the hospital without a baby and with a box is life changing. And we have to figure out a better way to support people in those moments. Because I remember one of the biggest things me and my husband remember is when we were told our son died, it was very abrupt. It was very incompassionate. And we want to educate clinicians on how to change that. Even if it can't be that person, have maybe a social worker to come in and be able to support that family in their time of need. Because in that instant, me and my husband became two different people. Our lives will never be the same. And how the trajectory of how we perceive with our lives in that moment is very critical. Like how we're supported in that moment is very critical. So one of our main goals is to change the way families are supported when they do experience loss, because it's life changing and they won't ever be the same. And it really depends on who's there in that room when they get that news to be able to process that will determine how they come out of it. So that's what we're working on at Jace's Journey. Always trying to support families, always trying to be a voice for the people who don't get an opportunity to share their stories. But being there to let people know, like, this is happening. Stillbirth happens a lot. There are 21,000 stillbirths in the country a year. And it gets downplayed because of infant mortality, but the numbers are really neck and neck. And we don't, as far from a stillbirth perspective, there's not a lot of things getting done to prevent stillbirth. We are definitely trying to prevent infant mortality, and we should be, but we need to put the same energy in trying to prevent stillbirth as well. Thank you, NECA.
I can remember in the 80s, and this has only been since I've become an advocate that I really was able to see and follow the statistics. In the 80s, and I know you're younger than I am, so you might not remember back that far, but Sandra, Nancy, I'm gonna call on y'all, and anyone who was born in the 70s.
I just want to say I was born in the 70s. I'm just going to say that it was the late 70s, but I was born, so whatever.
I was born in the early 70s, okay? But I can remember people saying that there were no Black men. They couldn't find any or none that were dateable or marriable because they were all in prison. And it wasn't until I became familiar with the Black infant mortality rate, Black stillbirth rate, that I realized they weren't in prison. They either died before they were born or they died before their first birthday. And that really, stillbirth is still happening. And that's something that people need to understand. And whose job is it for this to end? It's each and every one of us, to be aware that these materials are available for free. Any one person can go onto the Count the Kicks website, and if it's not free, it's only $5 for a set of 25. And if you still don't want to pay that, reach out to your state's ambassador and they'll give you some. Um, but I know you have to run. Enjoy this fancy party. It has been a pleasure. And thank you so much for sharing Jace with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Y'all have a great night.
You do the same. Um, and that was Tamika James Isaac in North Carolina. Thank you. Thank you for, oh, she's gone. Oh, Zakisha is entering. Perfect timing. Nancy, would
Yes.
you tell us about yourself and tell us about the work that you do with Count the Kicks, you did with Count the Kicks, excuse me, and how you use that tool in the work that you do?
Okay. Well, I am actually, a lot of people come to this work. I found in stories, listening to stories through traumatic events that they've had in their own lives. I did not come there by that way. I started off as an educator and I retired from the field of education a few years ago and decided, because of the Black maternal and infant rates, to become a doula because I was really interested in reproductive justice advocacy. I became a doula and a certified lactation counselor, but being a person that's always seeking more knowledge and wanting to make sure that I was able to serve my clients as well as possible, I wanted to learn more. And I learned about being a Pell Advocate, pregnancy and infant loss with NECA's class. And in that class, she promoted Count the Kicks, told us about it, told us we needed to sign up, told us we needed to get the materials. And I went on the website, I learned all those things, and decided to become an ambassador. And I was an ambassador for 2.5 years, decided to step off to pursue some more local activities, but I will always promote Count the Kicks materials and information with my clients and with the general public because it definitely saves lives. Um, when I think about most of my clients that I have, they either are experiencing high risk pregnancies and or rainbow pregnancies. So even if they aren't experiencing a loss right and at the time, um, they're carrying a lot of anxiety and fear. They're not sure whether to be nervous, excited, guilty because I'm having another baby and it was my fault that I was not able to protect the last one. And the things that I've learned are, how to better support them and listen with patience and encourage them to feel their feelings, but to also uh, connect to the joy that they should be experiencing now with this new pregnancy. And one of the ways that I help them do that is with the information, Count the Kicks information. Almost everyone has a phone where they can download the app. As NECA and Tamika both said, it's very simple to use. I help navigate that and encourage them with it because, or it helps the partner be involved. So the partner can do the timer, the partner can help the mom feel the kicks, the partner can say, hey, it's time to do this. So that's another way to get partners involved in the pregnancy, a bonding time for the whole family. And again, the data for the doctor is huge. And just within the last 6 months, I've had two moms concerned as a result of counting their kicks and going in and then feeling relief because maybe baby's just turned a different way, or the placenta is not facing the right direction where she could feel all the movement. But she knew enough as a result of using the app to go and get checked. And she wasn't just sitting at home worried about it. And if something had been wrong, she was alerted to the fact that things weren't going exactly as they should. So that's um, a wonderful reason for people to be involved with Count the Kicks. Sometimes when I see someone in public and they are talking about their pregnancy, and I know for certain that they're pregnant, I share the information with them. You have to be pretty careful about walking up to people and handing out literature. You know, you don't know what their story is necessarily. But once I know that they're pregnant, I have these little cards that look like business cards, and they demonstrate how to download the app and how to use it. I'm giving those to everyone. Whenever I'm tabling events for my organization or working with other organizations, I make sure I have Count the Kicks pamphlets and information there and explain that to moms because it's just invaluable information. I mean, we've said this over and over again in this conversation this evening. It's easy, it's quick, and it's life-saving. So there's no reason not to do it.
Funny story for you guys. When I had my right hip replaced in August of 2023, my the goal was to get me up and walking so I could go home the same day. So I had this noticeably pregnant physical therapist come and grab me, and I had an issue with it. I'm sitting there and I'm noticing, and I'm like, what if I go down? This woman is very pregnant. And, what? So we're walking, and I felt a plummet, and I knew I was going to hit the ground. So she's trying to grab me, and I'm pulling away so that she can't grab me. And I said, look, there's not going to be any instance where I allow you to grab me. So I'm going to put myself on this seat, on this step, while you go get some help. So she went and pressed something on the wall, and someone was supposed to come help. While that person was taking their time, and y'all already, the Count the Kicks ambassadors already know what I took the time to do while we were waiting for that person to come to assist. I'm sitting there, and I started talking to her about this app. I had her to pull out her phone and download the app in front of me because she's saying to me, well, I'm safe. I'm in my third trimester. Well, I did not tell her that I had suffered a third trimester loss because I didn't want that. I didn't want to get that look that I get whenever I tell that to anybody. And B, I didn't want to scare her. I said, I'm already sitting on this step half dead. Could you please give me one dying wish and download this app and learn how to use it? And she looked at me, and that was my way of getting her to use the app. Yes, we find ourselves chasing after people when we see a positive. Now, I haven't come across, but I have heard stories of people thinking people were pregnant and they weren't. But, just in case, it's a necessity. Zakisha, I see that you joined. And Dr. Nancy, don't leave. We're going to get back to you. Zakisha, all the way from Georgia, how are you this evening?
I am well. How are you?
I am doing great. And Zakisha is one of the, I don't know if you're the only or you are one of the Count the Kicks ambassadors in Georgia. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you use this app in the work that you do.
Okay. I'm Zakisha. I'm here in Georgia. I generally am called the rural doula. I'm a doula, placenta encapsulator, a community breastfeeding educator, pale advocate. and a whole bunch of little hats in between. And I decided to top it all off with being a student midwife because we need more Black midwives, especially that are willing to go to the rural middle Georgia and things areas. I am at this time contracted with Medicaid and WellStar medical system. So I am one of the few that generally go to all 7 locations now, but I am mostly in Augusta, the WellStar LaGrange, or West Georgia, and also Spalding. So most of the rural areas there. We have gotten pretty well with working with the OBs in those areas that they now have made it normal for their prenatals to recommend count the kicks. They generally do around 25, sometimes a little before that weeks, just depending on how it's going when mom's saying they're really feeling babies. We have been blessed because I'm in that WellStar system that other doulas are picking up on it, and it's going through pretty much all the 6, 7 locations that we're working at. That my co-doula, which is Miss Naima, was actually able with Count the Kicks to realize that her client was having a placenta abruption. So that was a save for last year because they went straight in and had to go straight into an emergency C-section, knowing that those movements were off for the babies. I think the best thing from the app is showing that even though these movements may be considered normal, what is normal for your baby, and that you're able to track and show data of what is normal for your baby and not just the normal statistics.
Wow, that was amazing, an amazing baby save. Hopefully we will in time see that on the if this little one or little ones are not already on the baby save wall on Count the Kicks. Maybe that would be
I will have to ask Naima if her client is willing to, because it wasn't my client, but we've done a few where we're like, hey, something's wrong, and we've had low fluid and things, but that one was an emergency.
Right, because a placental abruption could steal not only the baby's life, but also the mom's life.
Yes.
So that was a double save right there, courtesy of kick counting and understanding the difference between what the movements had been and what they were. So that's a beautiful thing. Both of you have talked about, can one of you explain? I mean, we've been talking about fetal movements and counting kicks. Can you explain the process and what it looks like? Nancy? Oh,
When you open the app, there's a little circle with a footprint in it, and it has a timer on, and every time you feel a movement, and that could be a turn, a twist, an elbow, kick, it doesn't just have to be a kick. Every time you feel those movements in this time period, you hit the footprint. And when you get to 10 kicks, you stop. You have to do this at the same time every day, which is the whole point of collecting the data at the same time, so that you know that at 3 p.m., it usually takes my baby 15 minutes to get to 10 kicks. So like Zakisha was saying, what's normal for your baby, because with my baby, it might take my baby 30 minutes to get to 10 kicks. So after, a series of days of counting those kicks like that, then you'll start to see a pattern. And after that point, if by chance you were at 15 minutes generally, and now all of a sudden you start to do it at 3 p.m. and it's taking your baby 30 minutes to get to 10 kicks, or you start the timer at 3 p.m. and it only takes your baby 2 minutes to get to 10 kicks, that number and that timing is off. It's not normal for you, and that's a time when you would contact your doctor. Some of the things that are kind of interesting when I first start talking to clients about it and they aren't understanding, they might do the time, check it out at many different times of the day, or they might just count and count and count and not stop counting and not know how long it took. So we have to practice it a little bit sometimes at the beginning. But I have noticed too that when they have that information and that data and they can go to the doctor and say, hey, this is what's usually normal for me, and this is what's happening right now, and this is not right, then the doctor is more inclined to listen. They like numbers and data. I hate when the doctors say, oh, yeah, your baby, yeah, it's moving, or they'll just ask. Because I asked them, what is your doctor saying to you about your baby moving? And the doctor says, oh, have you been feeling the baby move? Well, yes, the baby's going to move, but what does that really mean? Um, so if the doctor's telling you just turn on your side or go for a walk or drink some orange juice, that's not sufficient. And like I said earlier, the two clients in the last 6 months who were not feeling comfortable with the numbers that they got and went into the doctor to see about it, they could say, this is what I should be feeling. And they were able to get some to relieve that anxiety.
The one thing that we have to understand is that we're talking about voluntary movements when you talk about rolls, kicks, and jabs. You would not count the hiccups or the coughs or anything that is involuntary. So that's something that we stress to anyone who might be listening and say, oh, I want, I'm going to do this. And that's just something. And providers asking if they feel the baby moving. Well, the reason why it's not sufficient is because anything in fluid moves. And babies can be very, very sick. And I love the analogy that Count the Kicks gives. Um, Babies are humans. When you don't feel well, what do? You slow down. So naturally, these little people in utero are going to slow down when they're not feeling well. And that's a warning sign. So for providers to continue to ask, are you feeling the baby move? That's not sufficient anymore. That's obsolete. And I love the fact that this app has this data. And um, correct me if I'm wrong, it's in multiple languages. And for those who may not have a mobile device or a computer, there are printout versions. So they can do it manually using their hand. There are also bracelets that can help them count. And you guys may have, I'm not, not well versed in this anymore. So you may have other gadgets and fun things that will help community members count these kicks and potentially save their child's lives. So Zakisha, Dr. Nancy, before we open the floor to questions, are there any other things that you'd like to add about your work, about saving lives using Count the Kicks, etc.? No? What about you, Zakisha?
Um, the only thing I will always say to any parent, trust your instincts. Despite what any book that we have, any education we've had, your instincts will always trump that. And if it means you have to go in and get checked multiple times, oh well. But if your instincts is saying something's going on, then go. There's no question that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And push. If you're there and they're looking at you and they do a couple of things and say, "Oh, you're fine, just go home." If you're still not feeling well, keep at it, stay there.
Thank you. And you're not understanding that you're not a bother. That's the thing that many of us have an issue with, not feeling like a bother. Be a bother. And this, of course, this is the time to be a bother if you're feeling like you're not wanting to be one. Sandra, do you have any questions for our guests?
I first and foremost want to ask Dr. Nancy, what is the name of your organization?
Center Baby Doula Services, LLC, and I'm a full spectrum doula and certified lactation counselor.
Okay, because I see the sign, but I can't read it. So I had to have you say it so that
Yeah,
we
it's
can
a
actually
little
get
high.
it. So if you don't mind, put that in the chat as well, because as
Yes,
people
ma'am.
are viewing this, if they want to reach out, they'll know exactly where to reach out to. That was my first question to ask you. My second question is this: do you only, now I know you said now you're local and you're in St. Louis, do you only work with people in St. Louis? So if a mom had a question in reference to, counting the kicks or anything else that was going on, would you be able to answer that? Or would you say, you know what, I'm only in St. Louis, but I have some representatives, or I know a networking that I can get someone in touch with you?
If it's a quick, easy question, it's no problem for them to contact me to answer it. But if there is an ambassador who is local to them, I would also refer them to that person too, because they could be in direct contact with someone. So either way is fine.
Okay, thank you so much for that, because once again, as we're looking and as we're talking and answering questions, if someone is watching this later and they have questions, I do want them to be able to know that yes, you do, or you can, or this is what you would do. And then my last question to you, and then I'm going to switch over to Lakeisha. My last question to you is, since this Black History 2025 is focused in on labor, Blacks, African Americans, and labor, right? As far as from your standpoint, where do you see like three possible job duties that anyone, I know you said doula, you could be a doula, you could be a
Mhm.
lactation consultant, right? Is there any other job duty that someone could take a look at and say, okay, well, that's something I think I will be interested in that you do? Is there any other one?
Um, that I do, well, also, if you are a doula or a lactation counselor, you can do mentoring. People, I do mentoring. Um, I do not do placenta encapsulation, but a lot of other doulas do placenta encapsulation. Um, Something else I do is childbirth education. So once you get into the doula field, there are so many different branches off of it. A lot of people make herbal concoctions, different salves and tinctures and teas and things that support pregnancy and labor and childbirth. Um, so there's a pretty wide variety. Once you, like NECA calls it, the rabbit hole. Once you fall into the rabbit hole, there are lots of things that you can get into. The PAIL training, so teaching about the things that you know, or even being a doula trainer. There are several different branches off of actually doing doula work.
So see, for those of you that are listening and are in our community, don't say I don't have a job and I can't find a job, because there are jobs available. You just have to do the looking and the searching. And this goes for men as well as women. So I do know that there are some male doulas as well as female doulas. So this is definitely a job that you can look into. The labor market is getting tough. You can't wait for unemployment, because unemployment is not going to last you forever. get busy learning things and picking up on things that you can do no matter what your age is. If you're in high school and you're like, I want to do something in maternal, you start looking into these things that are out there for you. And for those, once again, that have been in the field and like, I'm tired, I want to do something else, this is certainly something that you can look into. So, Dr. Nancy, I say thank you.
Thank you for
And you know
having
what?
me.
I did say that was my last question, but I want you to do something for me. And that's because health literacy is a huge problem in our community.
Yes, ma'am.
Encapsulation. Can you break that down and tell us in layman's terms what exactly?
Okay. So, some people save their placenta, and when you get it encapsulated, the person who does it takes the placenta and they dry it out and they crush it, they grind it up, and they put it in capsules like a pill. And that's what the encapsulation is. So, people who want to take the placenta for a variety of reasons are able to use their placenta that way.
Thank you so much for that, because I'm sure people will be listening and be like, okay, well, what is that word? What do they do? Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we need to make sure health literacy comes at all different realms, and we have to realize that, and we have to know that sometimes it takes us breaking something down for us to get to understanding of it. So
Yes,
thank you for
ma'am.
that.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Miss Lakeisha, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I am doing good. You know, I have three of my close friends that live in Augusta. Two
Oh,
of my
it's
close
okay.
friends that live in Augusta. I've never visited. I was supposed to last year and I couldn't make it. But so yeah, my heart is there in Augusta with you, right? But this is my question to you. The rural areas of Augusta, of course, are there's a diverse group in those rural areas.
In some of the areas, some of them not so much. Um,
Okay.
and it kind of when you're in Augusta, they're not dealing with as much as like West Georgia has a lot of food deserts. Um, so it's also knowing what resources you can offer in that area. So they're kind of diverse. The hospital there a lot of their stuff is centralized. So like the hospital, Wellstar's hospital there is also connected to the Children's Hospital, and the Veterans Hospital is across the street. So they get this big onset of people.
So, so do you go into I know you go into the main hospital because that's where the moms are, but do you
Mhm.
also go into the children's hospital and like just to see what's going on there with our
Um,
youngest of the kids, or how old are they when they actually enter the children's hospital?
it just depends. There are newborns that they need more than what NICU can offer and have to go over to that children's side. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't had to have that opportunity yet at that hospital. I have been blessed enough that the program that we are under in Wellstar, that I have been able to go from West Georgia, Wellstar, and was able to travel with my client to Piedmont in Columbus. And they still allowed me to do all the things that I would have done there.
Okay, and
And
what is the state of maternal I'm going to say it like this. What is the state of minority maternal health in Georgia, period?
we are absolutely horrible. One of the ones in West Georgia has the absolute worst Black maternal death rate in Georgia.
And what does the field of doulas look like on the fields of anyone working in maternal health? I mean, is there a constant call for more to try to get more people involved in those fields?
It is. It is, especially in that area. The rural areas are starting to now learn about doulas, but you have to have that balance, because a lot of times the rural areas, the financials are different. They're not making as much as what Atlanta would make, and some people have to figure out, can they make that work in their budget? And a lot of people just don't know what a doula is. They think you're coming to take the place of the partner or the mom, and we have to break it down. No, I'm an extra resource.
Right.
I am not taking your place. So that's how, it's definitely getting more awareness. More of the doctors are aware that sometimes it can free them and they don't have to get so many phone calls, because when they're in that rural area, you have so many coming to just that one office or two offices. So it does kind of take some things off their plate. And now they're starting to let us in a little bit more. And they're
Okay.
asking about doulas, and they're having their lists for doulas that they like.
And so you were in the Pell program as well, correct?
I was in the Pell program. I've taken that Pell class several times. I am also in her training class now, getting ready to wrap up. I got to get my hoopla together and get ready to teach. Teach the first one. I was blessed enough that NECA trusted me enough to actually take care of her niece when her niece was here. So that was a different experience, but it was
It was a
pills on.
different experience because look, you couldn't go wrong. You couldn't do wrong. It was like, look, I gotta make sure this is done correct.
It was
You
absolutely,
do
I
that
had
with
to make
look, you
it
do that
correct,
with everybody.
but she does not trust many people. So it was also an
Mhm.
honor that she trusted me, not only to with a referral to take care of someone, but her actual family.
So my next question to you is this, and I know you just stated a little while ago. What is this? You stated that you're in nurse midwife, well, not nurse midwife, but you're in the midwife. You're in the midwife program, correct?
I'm a student midwife. I'm going more the apprenticeship route. I want to do home births. I'm not going into the hospital setting.
Okay. So is there a difference though in the training between the hospital setting and the home settings for midwives?
There is a complete difference. There, the standards are different, and the ones in the hospital, they go through more training. They have to go through the RN process first. I am not doing the RN process first. I am doing straight to into midwifery, because the home birth midwife or the community midwife, we deal with normal pregnancy. Anything outside of normal, then you would go to someone who's more trained, that has more, that can prescribe medication, different medications. We can do certain medications, but we're more on the natural side.
Okay.
So there's more herbal remedies with, like, you had diabetes that we cannot control with your diet and exercise in those, and you require insulin, then you would have to be transferred out of a home birth setting.
Okay. So it's not like they come and they just come for just to pregnant, just to have a baby. It's like their whole like 9 months are spent in that midwifery program. So that you can
Most
ensure that they don't have any complications and they're okay to stay there and be at home giving birth, correct?
correct.
Okay.
And some people
And
still choose to do their well women's care as well. You can still do your well woman care with a community midwife as well.
okay, and I know you say that you did so much. So out of all of the stuff that you do, which one do you, and in this, in healthcare, right? When we're all in healthcare, and this is the thing about us. We don't just do one thing. We Neka just said it earlier. That rabbit hole opens and we go climbing in it. So what's going on? We're trying to figure it out, clear it out, right? So it's a
Mm-hmm.
straight path for the rabbit. So when he get there, he can just go straight down, right? To
Right.
stop nowhere. But and so you reminded us of that. What out of the things that you do, what do you like enjoy the most?
Ooh, I will say it's a combination of it all, because you use all those skills sometimes to
Mm,
make something work. I loved, it's kind of a tie between the doula as in just the regular birth. I love birth. Birth is where I thrive. So just the home births and hospital births is the birthing space. And, I am typically, if you don't fit inside of the box, you're most likely my client. Um, so I get to see the variety of things. I deal with Mormon, Mennonite, LGBTQIA, pan, people with multiple wives. Like, I am that person. So seeing how different culturally also things work.
mhm.
those that makes me, I love her. I love to see how it works and how family comes together for that birthing person.
And so my last question to you is this. I see that lovely sign behind you that says power of love. What exactly is power of love? I got one other question after this, but what exactly is power of love?
For me, the power of love, I'm the power of love birth services. Because I am definitely into inclusivity. And as parents birthing people, there are things that you will go through for your children and strength that will come out of anywhere because you love them. And I see so many, you're in labor, they're pushing, they're working because they want to see that baby. And it's just that power of love that I've seen change so many different things, situations, life, all kinds of things that you will go through. And I think just that power that love gives you, it is nothing like it. Like when they say love at first sight doesn't exist, it's a lie. I've seen it every time when you look at that baby. When you look at that baby, that is the biggest joy for me. Out of all of it, is seeing that first look.
Hmm. And I totally agree. And then my last question is this: can you give us 3 skills that you would have that I don't want to say that you would have, but 3 skills that anyone that's looking to do the type of work, the doulas, the midwifery, can you give us 3 skills that will help our community in entering that field and being successful at it?
I will say the first one is always humility because I don't care how much you don't know everything. And it's just not possible. So humble yourself sometimes when you're in this space. You may think you're the expert, but you may not be the expert.
Mm.
Um, and willing to learn. And a big lesson is to learn that that's your choice, their choice. So sometimes, even though you may think this is the correct choice, knowing how to separate the two, that this is
Yeah.
not your patience and I would just say just learning to be compassionate.
Well,
Be
I thank you so
compassionate.
much for that. And as I'm getting ready to turn this back over to NECA, but both you and Dr. Nancy, thank you so much for giving insight, giving some tips to help our community to figure out, okay, yeah, well, I could do that. They gave me some additional information that we can get. We have to help each other. We have to. It's imperative, especially right now as we enter a new political season. We have with new political people in play. We have to count on each other to show each other, to lead each other, to mentor each other, basically to lift each other up through good and bad. We have to do that right now. It's no time like the present other than for you to learn what's out here. And you've heard by listening to this video what's out here and what you're capable of doing and giving you some ideas. And so thank you so much. Nick, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. And now I'm going to open it up to the floor to our guests. If you have a comment, a question, now is the time to ask it. And then we will end for the evening.
I have a comment. I just want to say I am so overwhelmed, proud of you young women and what you're doing. I find myself wondering, how can we reach the wider population of our people? Because there's so many people that don't know about Count the Kicks, what Sandra, you and NECA are doing, Zakia, Dr. Lewis. You're phenomenal women. And I guess my big worry is, how do we get what you're doing out to the wider population?
I can say that it's one of those things like when you buy a red car and then you're driving down the street and all of a sudden you see all the red cars. since I've become a doula, I've met more doulas. My network of doulas and the things that doulas do has broadened. And I've noticed that the community, especially in our hospitals and our providers in the area where I am, everyone is becoming more open to the idea of having doulas in place. And so I think there have even been more news stories. There are more studies happening about the how having a doula supporting a birth increases the odds of so many positive outcomes. And so I think when more people have the opportunity to learn about what's going on and more people understand and appreciate the value of what doulas and midwives can do, I think that is part of the way that we increase the knowledge of the community.
Lakeisha, do you have anything to add?
I would definitely say just sometimes it's word of mouth. It's literally having that conversation with family, with friends. When you find out, are they pregnant? Hey, do you have a doula? And some of them are like, what is a doula? When I say, layman's term, I'm a labor coach. But know that there are so many things that a doula can do. I'm also a VBAC specialist. So even if you're having a C-section, I'm coming. Like that. There's a doula. There are so many other things that we can do. Can we look at the postpartum side? You may just need somebody to come in and watch the baby so you can take a shower and we can cook you a meal. Know that doula has such a spectrum and that word of mouth will go so far. Even if you just say a labor coach or somebody that can just help you make some decisions, an extra eye, because sometimes we may not need to be in here touching everything, but we are your eyes and ears. If something goes wrong, guess who's coming? If we see something wrong, we can spot the things and correct it. Like just word of mouth, knowing that sometimes just even a conversation, a simple conversation in the store, with family, with your friends, at the church, wherever there's pregnant people, want to getting pregnant people, just like you, schedule who's your OB, let's get your doula.
Can you tell everyone, you said VBAC. Now, I know what a VBAC is.
Oh.
And Nancy knows what a VBAC is. Can you tell everyone who may not know what a VBAC is what that is?
VBAC is a vaginal birth after cesarean. So I certified under Denise Bowles, and her naming for it is Black Women Can VBAC, because if you look at the calculator that they use to determine can you have a VBAC, being Black automatically deducts points and can automatically rule you out just because you're Black. So there's a lot that goes with it. But VBACs, if you're scheduled to have a C-section, there is way more decisions that you can make and have control. Get a doula. Even if they're not allowed in the OR, a lot of the hospitals have now started to let us in the OR. But if you're not, we can get you prepared before so you have the best outcome where you're healing better. We can be at your house after. There's so many other things that can be done than just you run in there. Well, I'm having a C-section. I don't need anybody. You do. You still need somebody. You still need somebody. So word of mouth is mine.
Thank you. Are there any other questions out there? And just know that we do have Dr. Rebecca Seagraves coming in to talk about the role of the physical therapist during C-section, postpartum period, etc. Lay down the road in say a couple of weeks. So that's going to be a powerful conversation. Any other questions in the audience, from the audience?
I don't have a question, but I do actually want to touch upon something that Auntie Gwen said, and it's this. We know that we have our backs against the wall when we're trying to get information out. We know that our community as a whole will do everything they can other than prioritize their health and the health of their children and the health of their community. We know that, but we can't stop. We cannot stop putting it out there in the hopes that at least one person will listen, will hear, and will follow direction. We have to stop waiting until our young women get into our young women and our young men, but especially our young women when it comes down to maternal health. We have to stop waiting until they get to be 18 because our kids are having sex when they're 11, 12 years old and they're having babies. So we've got to keep this talk going. We've got to put it out there so that as many people as we can touch, we do. And we've got to just keep staying focused on here's some options. What Zakisha just stated about the options. Here's some options. If you go to a doctor and they tell you no, you ain't got no options, there's only one way, you need to keep walking because you always have an option. This program that me and Nneka put on this month is to teach everyone that there are always options, to teach everyone that there's options about your health, that there's options about your labor and what you do as far as a career path. There are always options. So we so gratefully thank you, Auntie Gwen, for coming in, for saying what you just said. But as long as we keep our eyes on the prize, which is the health, the sustainable health of our community, we're doing good.
And I know you cringe when I say this, but it's important more than this month to show up and show out when it comes to our air quote Black jobs. And you know why I use that term. Y'all know exactly why I use that term. Because this shows that we are more than, and we know more than, in order to enact change in our communities. So, any other questions before we close out for the evening? I guess there aren't. Well, I would love to thank our guests for being here. Dr. Nancy Lewis, all the way from St. Louis and Missouri, and Zakisha, all the way from Georgia. I won't say Augusta because you're all throughout Georgia, or Georgia, as a person that we may all be familiar with would say. Tune in again tomorrow night when we're talking about fertility.
We want to thank Miss James.
Oh, yes, Tamika James Isaac. Thank you. Thank you, Tamika, for also, thank you, Auntie, for reminding me for when she was here earlier. It has been a powerful and power-filled show this evening. And with that said, good night, everyone. See you again tomorrow night.
Good night.
Good night.